In a gleaming Silicon Valley boardroom, a 67-year-old woman was about to face career-ending humiliation. What started as a consulting pitch took a shocking turn when she encountered two arrogant young founders. Cora Mitchell wasn't your typical retiree. For 3 decades, she had built the algorithms powering half of Silicon Valley, known for turning struggling companies into giants. When Tyler Brooks sneered, "You can't teach an old dog new tricks," she had no idea she was walking into the fight of her life. Cora's quiet acceptance would lead to the most calculated corporate takedown in tech history. The startup world would never recover. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Cora Mitchell adjusted her navy blazer as she stepped from the Uber onto the sun-drenched sidewalk of Sand Hill Road. At 67, she still carried herself with the precise bearing of someone who had commanded boardrooms for decades, though the silicon and glass towers around her felt more foreign now than they had when she'd helped shape the algorithms that powered half of them. Innovate Tech's headquarters gleamed with that particular Palo Alto aesthetic, minimalist concrete and floor-to-ceiling windows that promised transparency while revealing nothing. Cora paused at the entrance, her reflection caught in the polished steel doors. Silver hair pulled back in a professional chignon, reading glasses hanging from a chain she'd started wearing after her forced retirement 2 years ago. The chain felt like a concession to age she resented, but her vanity had limits. "Ms. Mitchell?" A young woman with a tablet appeared as if summoned by sensors. "I'm Jenna, Tyler's assistant. He's ready for you." The lobby buzzed with the controlled chaos of a startup burning through its Series B funding. Employees who looked barely old enough to drink coffee clustered around standing desks, their MacBooks covered in stickers that proclaimed their allegiance to various open-source projects and meditation apps. Cora recognized the energy. She'd felt it herself once, when the industry was younger, and so was she. The elevator deposited them on the 5th floor, where glass-walled conference rooms bore names like Disruption Station and The Think Tank. Tyler Brooks waited in the largest one, his signature black t-shirt and designer jeans the uniform of a CEO who'd never worked for anyone else. At 28, he possessed the kind of confidence that came from early success and limited failure. "Ms. Mitchell," Tyler's smile was practiced, the kind reserved for investors and board members. "Thank you for coming. Sarah will join us in a moment." Cora settled into the ergonomic chair, her tablet and leather portfolio arranged with the precision of someone who'd learned that preparation was armor. "I appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are." "Always time for industry veterans," Tyler said, though his eyes were already drifting to his phone. "Though I have to say, I'm curious what brings you to Innovate Tech. We're not exactly in the consulting space." Before Cora could respond, Sarah Martinez entered with the fluid efficiency of someone who lived in code and data. The co-founder and CTO was 26, with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she'd been solving complex problems since middle school. Her handshake was firm, her assessment quick and calculating. "Sarah, meet Cora Mitchell, former VP of Strategy at Omnicom Systems," Tyler said, settling back in his chair with the air of someone enjoying a private joke. "Omnicom," Sarah nodded, her tone neutral. "Legacy enterprise software. Haven't they been struggling with the cloud transition?" The dismissal was subtle but unmistakable. Cora felt the first pinprick of irritation but kept her expression pleasant. Every company faces transitions. The question is whether you adapt or get left behind. She opened her tablet, pulling up the presentation she'd spent 3 weeks preparing. "Which brings me to why I'm here. I've been following Innovate Tech's progress, and I believe there are opportunities to strengthen your market position." Tyler leaned forward with exaggerated interest. "Oh? And what makes you think we need strengthening?" Cora swiped to her first slide, a detailed analysis of Innovate Tech's customer acquisition costs versus lifetime value ratios. "Your CAC to LTV ratio has been deteriorating over the past 6 months. You're spending more to acquire customers who are staying for shorter periods." Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. The data was accurate, uncomfortably so. Additionally, Cora continued, "Your churn rate in the enterprise segment suggests issues with product market fit at scale. Companies are adopting your platform but not expanding their usage." Tyler's smile had tightened. "Those are temporary growing pains. Every scaling company goes through them." "Perhaps. But your core algorithms, the ones handling predictive analytics for customer behavior, they're based on modified versions of the Hartwelchian optimization protocols, aren't they?" The silence that followed was electric. Sarah's fingers stilled on her laptop keyboard. Tyler's expression shifted from practiced dismissal to something sharper. "I'm not sure what you're suggesting," Sarah said carefully. Cora felt a flutter of recognition mixed with old pride. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating a fact. I helped develop those protocols at Omnicon in 1997. They were brilliant for their time, but they have known limitations when applied to real-time behavioral prediction at scale. She swiped to another slide showing predictive accuracy curves. Your algorithms are probably hitting a ceiling around 73% accuracy. You can optimize the parameters, but you'll never break 75% without addressing the fundamental architectural limitations. Tyler's chair creaked as he leaned back, his expression cooling. Ms. Mitchell, I appreciate your historical perspective. But I think you might be operating from some outdated assumptions about how modern machine learning works. Outdated? The word hung in the air like a challenge. No offense, Tyler continued, warming to his theme, but the industry has moved pretty far beyond the approaches from your era. What worked in the 90s doesn't necessarily apply to today's problems. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, but didn't intervene. Cora felt something cold settle in her chest, not surprise, but the familiar sting of being dismissed not for being wrong, but for being old. You're right, Cora said quietly. The industry has evolved. But the mathematics haven't. And neither have the fundamental principles of customer behavior. Tyler exchanged a look with Sarah, one of those wordless communications that excluded everyone else in the room. Look, Ms. Mitchell, I think we're probably not the right fit for traditional consulting approaches. We're focused on innovation, on pushing boundaries. Our whole philosophy is about thinking differently, not falling back on how things used to be done. The words hit like a physical blow, but Cora's expression remained neutral. Decades of boardroom politics had taught her to absorb attacks without flinching. I understand, she said simply. Nothing personal, Tyler added, his tone now carrying a note of condescension that made Sarah wince. It's just that in this business, you can't afford to be stuck in the past. You need people who understand modern problems, modern solutions. The game has changed pretty dramatically. Cora began closing her tablet with deliberate care. Has it? Absolutely. The pace of innovation, the complexity of the problems we're solving, it's not something you can approach with traditional thinking. You need minds that were shaped by the current landscape, not trying to apply yesterday's solutions to tomorrow's problems. Tyler was hitting his stride now, the kind of performance that played well in TED Talks and investor presentations. No disrespect to your generation's contributions, but today's challenges require today's thinking. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, as they say. The cliché landed with the weight of a slap. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment, but still she said nothing. Cora stood, her movements controlled and graceful. Well, I certainly wouldn't want to waste any more of your time with my outdated thinking. Hey, don't take it personally. Tyler said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. It's just business. Maybe there are some slower-moving companies that could benefit from your experience. Companies that aren't trying to change the world. Cora nodded once, gathering her things. Thank you for your time. As she walked toward the elevator, she could hear Tyler's voice carrying through the glass walls, already moving on to the next meeting, the next opportunity to demonstrate his brilliance. Sarah's response was too quiet to catch, but Cora didn't need to hear it to know the younger woman was uncomfortable with what had just happened. The elevator doors closed on the sight of Tyler gesturing animatedly at his laptop, no doubt already forgetting the older woman who dared to suggest she might have something valuable to contribute. But Cora hadn't forgotten. As the elevator descended, she was already thinking about those Hartwelchian protocols, about the patent filings she'd helped draft, about the technical debt that inevitably accumulated when brilliant young minds built on foundations they didn't fully understand. The lobby was still buzzing with youthful energy as she walked through it, but now she heard something different in the conversations. A brittleness beneath the confidence. A strain in the laughter that suggested the venture capital wouldn't last forever. Outside, the California sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Cora stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the eucalyptus-scented air, feeling something shift inside her chest. Not defeat. Not even anger, really. Curiosity. Her phone buzzed with a text from her Uber driver, but she ignored it. Instead, she pulled up Innovate Tech's website, scrolling through their team page, their investor relations, their glowing press coverage. All of it painted a picture of a company on the rise, disrupting industries, changing the world. But Cora had learned to read between the lines. She'd helped write some of those lines, back when she'd crafted the narratives that turned struggling startups into unicorns. She knew the signs of a company burning through cash faster than it could generate sustainable revenue. She recognized the specific type of technical debt that accumulated when smart people made assumptions about systems they'd inherited but never truly understood. Most importantly, she understood something Tyler Brooks had never learned: in Silicon Valley, the most dangerous enemy was the one you underestimated. The Uber arrived, its driver apologizing for the delay. Cora settled into the back seat, her tablet already open, her fingers moving across the screen with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd built an empire on knowing exactly what questions to ask. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Home," Cora said, not looking up from her research. "I have work to do." As the car pulled away from Innovateca's gleaming headquarters, Cora was already 3 moves ahead, her mind mapping the chessboard she'd just realized she was playing on. Tyler Brooks thought he'd dismissed an irrelevant old woman. But he'd actually just awakened something far more dangerous, a strategist with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The real game was just beginning. Cora's hand trembled slightly as she set down her coffee cup, the ceramic clicking against the saucer with more force than intended. The humiliation from yesterday's meeting still burned, but beneath the sting lay something sharper, a familiar hunger she hadn't felt in years. Her dual monitors glowed in the pre-dawn darkness, displaying Innovateca's corporate filings spread across multiple browser tabs. SEC documents, patent applications, employment records, the digital paper trail. That told the real story behind Tyler Brooks's confident facade. Cora had learned long ago that the most important battles were won with information, not emotion. "Let's see what you're really made of," she murmured, pulling up Innovateca's latest 10K filing. The numbers painted a different picture than Tyler's swagger suggested. Cash burn rate, $2. 3 million monthly. Runway, 14 months at current spending. Revenue growth, declining quarter over quarter. Customer acquisition costs rising while lifetime values stagnated. Classic symptoms of a company that had scaled too fast without solving fundamental product-market fit issues. But it was the patent filings that made her pause. There, buried in the technical specifications for Innovateca's core predictive engine, were fragments of her own work. The Hartwelchian optimization protocols she'd developed at Omnicon, modified and repackaged but still recognizably hers. They'd built their entire platform on mathematics she'd helped create 25 years ago, then dismissed her as irrelevant. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Williams. "Coffee later? You sounded rattled yesterday." Cora smiled despite herself. Patricia had been her roommate at Stanford, back when computer science was still a boys' club and they'd had to fight for every line of code they wrote. Now a retired psychology professor, Patricia remained the one person who could read Cora's emotional temperature with scientific precision. She typed back, 1 p.m. at Blue Bottle. Bring your listening ears. Returning to her screens, Cora dove deeper into Innovateca's vulnerability assessment. Their primary investor, Meridian Ventures, had a history of pulling funding from underperforming companies. Portfolio analysis suggested they were already questioning Innovateca's trajectory, 3 missed milestones in the past quarter, revenue projections revised downward twice. The technical architecture revealed even more promising weaknesses. Innovateca's platform relied heavily on third-party APIs and cloud services, creating multiple points of potential failure. Their customer data was siloed across different systems, making the scalability issues she'd identified yesterday even more problematic. Most interesting was their dependency on a small Wisconsin company called Dataflow Solutions for their real-time processing engine. Dataflow had been struggling. Financially, their stock price had dropped 40% in the past year. If someone were to acquire Dataflow, they could essentially hold Innovatec hostage. Cora leaned back in her chair, pieces of a strategy beginning to form. This wasn't about revenge, that was emotional thinking, the kind that led to tactical errors. This was about demonstrating value in the most definitive way possible, by succeeding where others had failed. Her phone rang, Bob Sullivan's name flashing on the screen. She'd worked with the veteran investment banker for over 20 years, back when he was hungry and she was building her reputation. Now they were both approaching the twilight of their careers, but Bob still had the connections that made deals happen. "Morning, Cora. How would you feel about one last big play before retirement?" "Depends. We talking hostile takeover interesting, or restructuring interesting?" "More creative than hostile. Think strategic acquisition with a social justice angle." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Bob's chuckle carried decades of shared risk-taking. "Now you have my attention. What's the target?" Cora outlined Innovateca's situation, keeping her personal motivations carefully hidden beneath layers of financial analysis. Bob listened with the focused intensity of someone who'd evaluated thousands of deals, asking pointed questions about valuation, market position, and exit strategies. "The numbers work," he said finally. "But it's a complex play. You'd need to move carefully, probably through multiple acquisition vehicles to avoid triggering disclosure requirements too early. And you'd need someone on the inside who understands their technical architecture. I have some ideas about that. I bet you do. Send me the full analysis. If it's as solid as it sounds, I might know some people who'd be interested in backing this kind of play. After hanging up, Cora felt the familiar rush of a deal taking shape. She pulled up LinkedIn, searching for Emma Johnson, the young analyst at Bob's firm she'd heard about but never met. Harvard MBA, strong quantitative background, reputation for creative financial structuring. Most importantly, she was young enough to understand the generational dynamics at play while experienced enough to appreciate strategic complexity. The garden outside was coming alive with morning light, her neglected roses somehow still blooming despite her inattention. Like many things she'd underestimated lately, they'd proven more resilient than expected. Her coffee had gone cold, but Cora barely noticed. She was 3 spreadsheets deep into financial modeling, mapping out the intricate dance of shell companies, debt acquisition, and strategic partnerships that would give her control of Innovate Tech without triggering early warning systems. Tyler Brooks had made the classic mistake of assuming that experience meant obsolescence. But Cora understood something he'd never learned: in business, as in warfare, the most dangerous opponents were the ones who'd been underestimated so completely they'd become invisible. The real education was about to begin. The acquisition part 3, assembling the team. The flight to New York gave Cora 3 uninterrupted hours to review her strategy. Her laptop screen displayed a complex web of interconnected companies, financial instruments, and acquisition vehicles that would make Innovate Tech's downfall look like a series of unfortunate coincidences. But she needed more than just a plan. She needed people she could trust. Bob Sullivan's office occupied a corner of the 42nd floor at Meridian Capital, with windows that offered commanding views of both the Hudson River and Central Park. At 62, Bob had the kind of weathered confidence that came from surviving 3 decades on Wall Street, where reputations were built on billion-dollar deals and destroyed by missed decimal points. "Cora," he said, rising from behind his mahogany desk with genuine warmth. "It's been too long." She accepted his embrace, feeling some of her tension ease for the first time in weeks. Bob had been her investment banker during the merger that made her reputation in the late 90s, and they'd remained friends through every professional triumph and setback since. "You look like someone with a story to tell," he observed, gesturing toward the leather chairs arranged near his windows. "And knowing you, it's probably going to cost me money." "Probably," Cora admitted, settling into her chair. "But it might also be the most interesting deal you've worked on in years." Bob poured coffee from a service that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I'm listening." Cora opened her portfolio and pulled out a folder marked with Innovate Tech's log. "What do you know about systematic corporate acquisition through debt restructuring?" "That it's usually called a hostile takeover, and that you're one of the few people I know who could pull one off without anyone noticing until it was too late." Bob's eyes sharpened with professional interest. "Who's the target?" "A 28-year-old CEO who thinks experience is obsolete and wisdom is a liability." Cora's voice carried just enough edge to make Bob lean forward. "His company is built on algorithms I helped develop, funded by investors who don't understand the technology, and managed by people who mistake arrogance for innovation." Bob studied the financial projections Cora had prepared, his expression growing more intrigued with each page. "Innovate Tech. I've heard the name. Promising startup, but their burn rate is unsustainable. Their Series B funding dried up last quarter. Which makes them vulnerable," Cora said. "But I need someone who understands the intricacies of acquisition finance. Someone who can structure this properly." "You want to buy them," Bob said. "Not quite a question. I want to own them," Cora corrected. "There's a difference." Bob was quiet for a moment, studying her face with the analytical precision that had made him one of New York's most successful investment bankers. "This isn't just about business, is it?" "It's about proving that experience has value," Cora replied. "And about ensuring that companies built on borrowed wisdom don't get to dismiss the people who created that wisdom in the first place." A knock on the door interrupted them. Bob's assistant entered with a young woman whose professional attire couldn't quite conceal the nervous energy of someone trying to make an impression. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Emma Johnson from our M&A analysis team. You asked me to bring her up?" Emma stepped forward with the kind of controlled confidence that came from excelling in environments designed to intimidate her. At 29, she had the focused intensity of someone who'd fought for every opportunity and refused to waste any of them. "Emma's our best analyst for tech sector acquisitions," Bob explained. "Harvard MBA, 3 years here, and she has an uncanny ability to spot vulnerabilities that others miss." "Ms. Mitchell," Emma said, extending her hand. "I've read about your work at Meridian Systems. Your strategic framework for the cloud tech acquisition is still taught in business schools. Cora felt something unexpected, recognition. Not the dismissive acknowledgement she'd received from Tyler Brooks, but genuine respect from someone who understood the complexity of what she'd accomplished. Thank you, Cora said. Though I suspect the current generation of business students probably considers that ancient history. Emma's expression sharpened. Actually, I think the current generation could learn a lot from studying how deals were structured before everything became about disruption and venture capital. There's something to be said for methodical strategic thinking. Show her the Innovate Tech Analysis, Bob suggested. Emma accepted the folder and began reading with the kind of focused attention that made Bob's reputation for talent scouting seem almost supernatural. Her eyes moved quickly across the financial projections, occasionally stopping to make notes in the margins. Their debt-to-equity ratio is worse than their public filings suggest, Emma observed after a few minutes. And their intellectual property portfolio is surprisingly thin for a company claiming to be built on proprietary algorithms. Because the algorithms aren't proprietary, Cora said quietly. They're adaptations of work done decades ago by people the current management considers irrelevant. Emma looked up sharply. You're familiar with their technical foundation? I helped create it, Cora replied. 25 years ago, at a company that understood the value of institutional knowledge. For a moment, the room was silent except for the distant hum of traffic 42 floors below. Emma's expression shifted from professional interest to something approaching excitement. You want to acquire them, she said, the pieces falling into place. Not for their technology, but to prove a point about the value of experience versus the mythology of youthful innovation. Among other things, Cora confirmed. Emma turned to Bob. This could work. Their capital structure is fragile enough that a well-coordinated acquisition strategy could succeed. But it would require significant resources and perfect timing. How significant? Bob asked. Emma flipped through several pages, making quick calculations. 40 to 60 million, depending on how aggressively we move and how quickly their current investors decide to cut their losses. Bob whistled softly. That's not exactly pocket change. I have the resources, Cora said simply. The question is whether you're interested in the challenge. Bob stood and walked to his windows, looking out at the Manhattan skyline where fortunes were made and lost on decisions exactly like this one. You realize this could backfire spectacularly. If word gets out that we're targeting them, they could restructure, find new funding, or simply position this as an attack on innovation by the old guard. All of which are risks, Cora acknowledged. But I've spent 40 years learning how to manage risk. And I've never had a more compelling reason to succeed. Emma closed the folder and looked between Cora and Bob. If I may, this isn't just about corporate acquisition, is it? This is about challenging an entire cultural narrative about age and relevance in business. Smart girl, Bob muttered, but there was admiration in his voice. I'm interested, Emma continued. Not just professionally, but personally. I've watched too many experienced professionals get marginalized because they don't fit Silicon Valley's youth-obsessed culture. If we can prove that experience and strategic thinking are more valuable than disruption theater, it could change how the entire industry thinks about talent. Cora felt something she hadn't experienced in months, hope. Not just for her personal vindication, but for the possibility that her campaign against Innovate Tech could represent something larger. So we're doing this? Bob asked, returning to his chair. We're doing this, Cora confirmed. But I want to be clear about something. This isn't revenge. This is demonstration. When we're finished, Innovate Tech will be a better company than it is today, and everyone involved will understand why experience matters as much as innovation. Bob grinned with the kind of predatory satisfaction that had made him legendary in acquisition circles. When do we start? We already have, Cora replied, pulling out her phone. I have a call scheduled with my son in an hour. Jack's going to think I've lost my mind, but he's also going to realize that his mother isn't quite ready for retirement. As the afternoon light shifted across Bob's office, Cora felt the familiar surge of energy that came with assembling the right team for an impossible task. Tyler Brooks had dismissed her as obsolete, but he was about to learn that some forms of power only became more dangerous with age. The game was no longer about to begin. It had already started. The acquisition began not with dramatic announcements or corporate raids, but with a series of seemingly unrelated financial transactions that would have been invisible to anyone not looking for them. 3 weeks after her meeting with Bob and Emma, Cora sat in her home office watching the first dominoes fall. Meridian Capital purchased the outstanding debt from TechFlow Credit, Emma reported over their secure video conference. $2.8 million in convertible notes, acquired at 87 cents on the dollar. Bob's face appeared in another window, his expression carrying the satisfaction of a predator who'd just caught scent of wounded prey. The beauty is that TechFlow was desperate to clear their books before quarter end. They practically paid us to take Innovate Tech's debt off their hands. Cora made notes on her tablet, each acquisition meticulously tracked in spreadsheets that would have impressed her former colleagues at Meridian Systems. What about the Series A investors? 3 of the 7 are ready to sell, Emma continued. The economic downturn has them spooked, and Innovate Tech's missed milestones aren't helping. We've structured the purchases through separate LLCs to avoid pattern recognition. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of attempting a direct hostile takeover, they were systematically acquiring Innovate Tech's liabilities and minority stakes through a network of shell companies and investment vehicles. Each transaction appeared routine, even beneficial to the sellers, but collectively they were building a web of financial control around Tyler Brooks' company. How much of their debt do we control now? Cora asked. 43%, Bob replied. And growing. Their burn rate is accelerating faster than their revenue growth, which means more creditors will be looking to cut losses soon. Meanwhile, 2,000 miles away in San Francisco, Tyler Brooks remained blissfully unaware of the gathering storm. Cora had spent considerable effort monitoring Innovate Tech's public activities, and Tyler's social media presence suggested a man confident in his company's trajectory. His latest LinkedIn post celebrated their innovative disruption of traditional customer engagement models, complete with a photo of him speaking at a tech conference. He's doubling down on the youth narrative, Emma observed, pulling up Tyler's recent interview with TechCrunch. Listen to this quote: "The future of business belongs to digital natives who understand technology at an intuitive level. Traditional consulting approaches simply can't keep pace with the speed of modern innovation." Cora felt a familiar cold satisfaction. Tyler's arrogance would be his downfall, but she needed to ensure he had plenty of rope to hang himself with. What about their partnership with Cloud Systems? That's where things get interesting, Bob said, leaning forward. I've been working my contacts at Cloud Systems' parent company. Turns out they're reconsidering the partnership terms. Innovate Tech's technology integration has been problematic. The Cloud Systems partnership represented 30% of Innovate Tech's projected revenue for the quarter. If that relationship soured, their financial position would become untenable within months rather than quarters. Can we accelerate that timeline? Cora asked. Emma's fingers flew across her keyboard. Actually, yes. Cloud Systems is using legacy infrastructure that's incompatible with Innovate Tech's latest updates. I've identified 3 critical integration points where failure is almost inevitable. And you know this how? Because I've been studying the technical documentation they filed with their patent applications, Emma replied with a grin. Amazing. What you can learn when you actually read the fine print. Bob chuckled. I'm beginning to understand why Harvard recruited you so aggressively. The conversation was interrupted by Cora's phone buzzing with a call from Jack, her son. She'd been expecting this conversation since their team began making larger financial commitments. I need to take this, she said, stepping away from her computer. Jack's been monitoring my account activity. Mom? Jack's voice carried the careful tone of someone trying not to sound accusatory. I've been looking at some unusual transactions from your investment accounts. Large transfers to entities I don't recognize. Cora had anticipated this moment. Jack was a corporate lawyer with enough financial sophistication to recognize when his mother was engaging in something more complex than standard retirement investing. I'm working on a project, she said carefully. What kind of project requires $40 million in capital deployment across multiple LLCs? The question hung in the air between them. Cora could hear traffic in the background, suggesting Jack was walking between meetings in Manhattan, probably trying to squeeze this conversation into his impossibly busy schedule. The kind that proves your mother isn't ready for the retirement home yet, Cora replied. Jack was quiet for a moment. This is about that consulting meeting, isn't it? The one where they dismissed you. Among other things. Mom, I understand that was hurtful, but spending $40 million to prove a point seems excessive? Cora suggested. Or strategic? When Jack spoke again, his voice carried a note of recognition that made Cora smile. You're acquiring them, aren't you? You're buying the company that rejected you. I'm demonstrating the value of institutional knowledge and strategic thinking, Cora corrected. The acquisition is simply the mechanism. Jack laughed despite himself. God help them. They have no idea what they've unleashed. As Cora returned to her video conference, she felt the familiar surge of energy that came with executing a complex strategy. Tyler Brooks was about to learn that some wars were won not through direct confrontation, but through patient, methodical preparation that made victory inevitable long before the first shot was fired. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning when Cloud Systems' integration team discovered what Emma had predicted weeks earlier. Sarah Martinez stared at her laptop screen in Innovate Tech's conference room, her face pale as she absorbed the technical report that had just arrived in her inbox. "The API compatibility issues are worse than we thought," she said to Tyler, who was pacing behind her with the restless energy of someone trying to solve problems through movement. "Cloud Systems is reporting cascade failures across 3 different integration points." Tyler stopped pacing. "Define cascade failures." "Complete system crashes when our algorithm tries to process their legacy data structures," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the flat tone of someone delivering bad news. "Their infrastructure can't handle our real-time optimization protocols." The Cloud Systems partnership represented Innovate Tech's largest revenue stream, and both founders knew it. Without that relationship, their financial projections would collapse, taking their credibility with current and potential investors along with it. "This is fixable, right?" Tyler asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah rubbed her temples, a gesture Tyler had come to associate with their most intractable technical problems. "Not easily. We'd need to rebuild significant portions of our core algorithm to accommodate their data architecture. We're talking months of development work." "We don't have months," Tyler said flatly. "Our Series C presentation is in 6 weeks." While Tyler and Sarah struggled with their technical crisis, Michael Davis sat in his Portland apartment, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups, following a story that was becoming more intriguing by the day. As an investigative tech journalist, Michael had developed an instinct for patterns that others missed, and the unusual trading activity around Innovate Tech had triggered every alarm bell he possessed. "Meridian Capital, Apex Holdings, Strategic Ventures LLC," he muttered, mapping connections on his whiteboard. "All different entities, but the trading patterns are identical. Someone systematically acquiring Innovate Tech as debt." Michael's phone rang, interrupting his analysis. The caller ID showed a former Innovate Tech employee he'd interviewed months earlier about the company's work culture. "Michael? It's Lisa Chen. We talked about Innovate Tech last year?" "I remember. What's up?" "I heard something interesting. From a friend who still works there. Apparently, Tyler had some kind of meltdown yesterday about their Cloud Systems partnership. She said he was ranting about market manipulation and asking if anyone had noticed unusual activity in their financial accounts." Michael's pulse quickened. Did he elaborate on what kind of activity? "Something about their creditors and investors getting approached by acquisition firms. Tyler thinks someone's trying to position themselves for a hostile takeover." After ending the call, Michael stared at his whiteboard with growing excitement. Tyler Brooks might be arrogant and dismissive of older professionals, but he wasn't stupid. If he was detecting the pattern Michael had been tracking, it meant the acquisition campaign was entering a new phase. Meanwhile, in her Palo Alto home office, Cora received Emma's weekly update with quiet satisfaction. Cloud Systems officially notified Innovate Tech of contract renegotiation requirements, Emma reported over their video call. "They're demanding technical modifications that will take Innovate Tech at least 4 months to implement. And their cash flow can't sustain 4 months of reduced revenue," Cora observed. "Exactly. Bob's contacts at Pinnacle Ventures are getting nervous. They're the lead investor in Innovate Tech's current round, and they're already asking questions about liquidation scenarios." Bob's voice joined the conversation as he connected from his New York office. "I've been monitoring their internal communications through our investment networks. Tyler's becoming increasingly paranoid about market forces he can't control. He's hired a forensic accountant to analyze their creditor relationships." "How long before he identifies the pattern?" Cora asked. "Emma's shell company structure is sophisticated enough to delay recognition for another few weeks," Bob replied. "But once he starts digging seriously, he'll figure it out." The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Patricia Williams calling Cora's landline. Cora excused herself from the video conference and moved to her living room, where afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows. "How are you feeling about all this?" Patricia asked without preamble. Her voice carried the direct concern of someone who'd known Cora for 45 years. "Satisfied," Cora replied honestly. "For the first time since my retirement, I feel like I'm using my skills for something meaningful. And when Tyler Brooks realizes what you're doing? When this becomes public?" Cora was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Then we'll see whether Silicon Valley is ready to have an honest conversation about the value of experience versus the mythology of youth. You realize this could destroy him professionally," Patricia said gently. "He's young, arrogant, and cruel, but he's still a human being with a career and reputation. So was I, Cora replied. The difference is that I'm offering him a choice. He can acknowledge that experience has value and work with me to build a better company, or he can continue believing that wisdom expires with age. But I won't be dismissed again. Patricia sighed. Just promise me you'll remember the difference between justice and revenge. I know the difference, Cora said. Justice is what Tyler Brooks is about to receive. That evening, Sarah Martinez worked late in Innovate Tech's empty offices, trying to solve integration problems that seemed to multiply faster than she could address them. She'd always prided herself on her technical abilities, but these challenges felt different. Every solution revealed new complications, as if the problems were designed to be intractable. Around midnight, exhaustion finally forced her to admit something she'd been avoiding: she needed help. The kind of help that came from experience with complex system architectures and legacy integration challenges. The kind of experience that someone like Cora Mitchell might possess. For the first time since that humiliating pitch meeting, Sarah found herself wondering what insights they'd missed by dismissing Cora so quickly. Tyler's reflexive ageism had seemed justified at the time, supported by Silicon Valley's youth-obsessed culture. But sitting alone in her office, surrounded by technical problems she couldn't solve, Sarah began to question whether they'd made a catastrophic mistake. She pulled up Cora's consulting proposal, which Tyler had deleted but Sarah had saved in her personal files. Reading it now, with the perspective of their current crisis, she realized that Cora had identified every problem they were currently experiencing. The foundation was cracking, and Sarah was beginning to understand that their problems might not be as random as Tyler believed. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning when Cloud Systems integration team discovered what Emma had predicted weeks earlier. Sarah Martinez stared at her laptop screen in Innovate Tech's conference room, her face pale as she absorbed the technical report that had just arrived in her inbox. The API compatibility issues are worse than we thought, she said to Tyler, who was pacing behind her with the restless energy of someone trying to solve problems through movement. Cloud Systems is reporting cascade failures across 3 different integration points. Tyler stopped pacing. Define cascade failures. Complete system crashes when our algorithm tries to process their legacy data structures, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the flat tone of someone delivering bad news. Their infrastructure can't handle our real-time optimization protocols. The Cloud Systems partnership represented Innovate Tech's largest revenue stream, and both founders knew it. Without that relationship, their financial projections would collapse, taking their credibility with current and potential investors along with it. This is fixable, right? Tyler asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah rubbed her temples, a gesture Tyler had come to associate with their most intractable technical problems. Not easily. We'd need to rebuild significant portions of our core algorithm to accommodate their data architecture. We're talking months of development work. We don't have months, Tyler said flatly. Our Series C presentation is in 6 weeks. While Tyler and Sarah struggled with their technical crisis, Michael Davis sat in his Portland apartment, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups, following a story that was becoming more intriguing by the day. As an investigative tech journalist, Michael had developed an instinct for patterns that others missed, and the unusual trading activity around Innovate Tech had triggered every alarm bell he possessed. Meridian Capital, Apex Holdings, Strategic Ventures LLC, he muttered, mapping connections on his whiteboard. All different entities, but the trading patterns are identical. Someone systematically acquiring Innovate Tech's debt. Michael's phone rang, interrupting his analysis. The caller ID showed a former Innovate Tech employee he'd interviewed months earlier about the company's work culture. Michael? It's Lisa Chen. We talked about Innovate Tech last year? I remember. What's up? I heard something interesting. From a friend who still works there. Apparently, Tyler had some kind of meltdown yesterday about their Cloud Systems partnership. She said he was ranting about market manipulation and asking if anyone had noticed unusual activity in their financial accounts. Michael's pulse quickened. Did he elaborate on what kind of activity? Something about their creditors and investors getting approached by acquisition firms. Tyler thinks someone's trying to position themselves for a hostile takeover. After ending the call, Michael stared at his whiteboard with growing excitement. Tyler Brooks might be arrogant and dismissive of older professionals, but he wasn't stupid. If he was detecting the pattern Michael had been tracking, it meant the acquisition campaign was entering a new phase. Meanwhile, in her Palo Alto home office, Cora received Emma's weekly update with quiet satisfaction. Cloud Systems officially notified Innovate Tech of contract renegotiation requirements, Emma reported over their video call. They're demanding technical modifications that will take Innovate Tech at least 4 months to implement. And their cash flow can't sustain 4 months of reduced revenue, Cora observed. Exactly. Bob's contacts at Pinnacle Ventures are getting nervous. They're the lead investor in Innovate Tech's current round, and they're already asking questions about liquidation scenarios. Bob's voice joined the conversation as he connected from his New York office. I've been monitoring their internal communications through our investment networks. Tyler's becoming increasingly paranoid about market forces he can't control. He's hired a forensic accountant to analyze their creditor relationships. How long before he identifies the pattern? Cora asked. Emma's shell company structure is sophisticated enough to delay recognition for another few weeks, Bob replied. But once he starts digging seriously, he'll figure it out. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Patricia Williams calling Cora's landline. Cora excused herself from the video conference and moved to her living room, where afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows. How are you feeling about all this? Patricia asked without preamble. Her voice carried the direct concern of someone who'd known Cora for 45 years. Satisfied, Cora replied honestly. For the first time since my retirement, I feel like I'm using my skills for something meaningful. And when Tyler Brooks realizes what you're doing? When this becomes public? Cora was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Then we'll see whether Silicon Valley is ready to have an honest conversation about the value of experience versus the mythology of youth. You realize this could destroy him professionally, Patricia said gently. He's young, arrogant, and cruel, but he's still a human being with a career and reputation. So was I, Cora replied. The difference is that I'm offering him a choice. He can acknowledge that experience has value and work with me to build a better company, or he can continue believing that wisdom expires with age. But I won't be dismissed again. Patricia sighed. Just promise me you'll remember the difference between justice and revenge. I know the difference, Cora said. Justice is what Tyler Brooks is about to receive. That evening, Sarah Martinez worked late in Innovate Tech's empty offices, trying to solve integration problems that seemed to multiply faster than she could address them. She'd always prided herself on her technical abilities, but these challenges felt different. Every solution revealed new complications, as if the problems were designed to be intractable. Around midnight, exhaustion finally forced her to admit something she'd been avoiding: she needed help. The kind of help that came from experience with complex system architectures and legacy integration challenges. The kind of experience that someone like Cora Mitchell might possess. For the first time since that humiliating pitch meeting, Sarah found herself wondering what insights they'd missed by dismissing Cora so quickly. Tyler's reflexive ageism had seemed justified at the time, supported by Silicon Valley's youth-obsessed culture. But sitting alone in her office, surrounded by technical problems she couldn't solve, Sarah began to question whether they'd made a catastrophic mistake. She pulled up Cora's consulting proposal, which Tyler had deleted but Sarah had saved in her personal files. Reading it now, with the perspective of their current crisis, she realized that Cora had identified every problem they were currently experiencing. The foundation was cracking, and Sarah was beginning to understand that their problems might not be as random as Tyler believed. Tyler Brooks declared war on a Friday morning, armed with righteous indignation and a fundamental misunderstanding of his opponent. His counterattack began with a carefully orchestrated media blitz designed to paint Cora Mitchell as the face of everything wrong with Silicon Valley's old guard. This is corporate bullying at its worst, Tyler declared during his interview. With TechCrunch, his youthful intensity perfectly suited for the camera. A bitter, outdated executive trying to destroy innovation because she can't accept that her time has passed. This isn't about business, it's about a generational power grab. Sarah watched the interview from Innovate Tech's conference room, her stomach tightening with each inflammatory statement. She'd tried to warn Tyler about underestimating Cora, but his wounded pride had transformed into something uglier, a public campaign built on the same ageist assumptions that had started this conflict. Innovate Tech represents everything positive about modern innovation, Tyler continued, warming to his theme. We're disrupting traditional approaches that frankly don't work anymore. Some people from the old school can't handle that. They'd rather tear down what we've built than admit their methods are obsolete. The interviewer leaned forward with obvious interest. You're suggesting this acquisition attempt is personally motivated? Absolutely, Tyler replied without hesitation. Cora Mitchell came to us months ago, trying to sell consulting services that belonged in the 1990s. When we politely declined, she apparently decided to retaliate. This is what happens when the old guard refuses to step aside gracefully. Watching from her home office, Cora felt a familiar cold calculation settle over her thoughts. Tyler had just made a critical strategic error, but she suspected he was about to make it much worse. She was right. Within hours, Tyler appeared on 3 more podcasts and a local news program, each interview escalating his rhetoric. By evening, he'd characterized the acquisition as an attack on innovation itself and suggested that investors had a moral obligation to protect young entrepreneurs from predatory corporate practices. But Tyler's most damaging moment came during his appearance on the Valley Voice podcast, where host Marcus Kim asked about the specific consulting meeting that had supposedly triggered Cora's retaliation. "Look, I'll be honest," Tyler said, his confidence inflated by a day of sympathetic coverage. "She walked in with these outdated ideas about algorithmic optimization and customer engagement. It was like watching someone try to teach smartphone design using rotary phone concepts. We had to explain to her that modern consumers interact with technology in ways her generation simply can't understand." "You told her that directly?" Marcus asked. "Someone had to," Tyler replied with a laugh that sounded cruel even to his own ears. "I mean, I tried to be diplomatic, but when someone your grandmother's age tries to lecture you about AI-driven personalization algorithms, you have to draw the line somewhere." The interview went viral within 12 hours, but not in the way Tyler expected. Michael Davis published his follow-up article the next Monday, this time with a very different focus. The pitch meeting that started a corporate war, inside Tyler. Brooks' dismissal of industry veteran Cora Mitchell included audio excerpts from Tyler's various interviews, presented alongside Cora's impressive professional credentials and detailed analysis of her consulting proposal. The contrast was devastating. While Brooks characterized Mitchell's ideas as outdated, Michael wrote, "Our technical review of her original proposal reveals sophisticated insights into algorithmic optimization that could have prevented Innovateka's current integration failures with cloud systems." The proposal also accurately predicted every major challenge the company is currently facing. More damaging was Michael's inclusion of Tyler's grandmother comment alongside Cora's professional biography, MIT graduate, former VP of Strategy at Meridian Systems, architect of 3 major corporate turnarounds, and co-developer of algorithmic frameworks still used throughout Silicon Valley. The response was immediate and brutal. Emma called Cora within hours of the article's publication. "Twitter is exploding. #GrandmaAlgorithms is trending, but not the way Tyler hoped." Cora pulled up her laptop to see thousands of tweets from professionals sharing their own experiences with age discrimination. The hashtag had been hijacked by people posting stories of dismissed expertise, forced early retirements, and the systematic devaluation of experience in favor of youth. "My grandmother was coding before Tyler Brooks was born," read one viral tweet. "Maybe he should have listened instead of lecturing." Another post, shared over 10,000 times, simply said, "If someone built the foundations your company relies on, maybe don't call them irrelevant." But the most damaging response came from an unexpected source, Cloud Systems CTO, Dr. Rebecca Torres, who issued a public statement about Innovateka's integration failures. "We've been working with Innovatek for 6 months to resolve compatibility issues with their algorithms," Torres announced. "After reviewing the public discussion about their consulting practices, we reached out to Ms. Mitchell, who identified the root causes of these problems within 48 hours. Her proposed solutions are exactly what we needed." Tyler's phone began ringing immediately after Torres's statement. Bob Sullivan called from New York with barely contained laughter. "He's managed to turn himself into the poster child for tech industry ageism," Bob observed. "The board members I talked to are horrified. Nobody wants to be associated with this kind of PR disaster." Emma's analysis was even more pointed. Pinnacle Ventures issued a statement distancing themselves from Tyler's comments. 3 other portfolio companies have requested different representation. He's becoming toxic to his own investors. The coup de grace came that evening when Jack Mitchell called his mother, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and concern. "Mom, I just got off a call with 5 senior partners at my firm," he said. "They want to know if you're accepting new consulting clients." Apparently, Tyler Brooks just gave the best advertisement for experienced strategic thinking that anyone's seen in years. Cora felt something she hadn't expected, genuine sadness for Tyler. His arrogance had been infuriating, but watching him destroy himself publicly felt different than she'd anticipated. He could have handled this differently, she told Patricia Williams during their evening call. Even after the acquisition became public, he could have acknowledged the value of collaboration between generations. Instead, he doubled down on the same prejudices that started this. "Are you having second thoughts?" Patricia asked. "About the acquisition? No. About Tyler's future? Perhaps. But he's made his choice. He's decided that pride matters more than learning, and ideology matters more than results. I can't save him from the consequences of that decision." As the week progressed, Innovateka's situation deteriorated rapidly. 2 key employees resigned, citing concerns about the company's direction. A potential partnership with Dataflow Industries was cancelled after their CEO read Tyler's interviews. Most critically, Pinnacle Ventures formally requested a board meeting to discuss leadership concerns and strategic direction. Sarah Martinez watched it all unfold with growing horror and clarity. Tyler's counterattack hadn't just failed, it had accelerated their downfall while simultaneously vindicating everything Cora had argued about the value of experience and strategic thinking. The war Tyler had declared was already over. The only question remaining was whether he would recognize defeat gracefully, or continue fighting until there was nothing left to save. As Sarah prepared for what she suspected would be the most important conversation of her career, she realized that Cora Mitchell had accomplished something remarkable. She'd turned Tyler's own words into the most powerful argument imaginable for why experience, wisdom, and strategic thinking would always matter more than youthful arrogance. The revolution had come full circle, and the old guard had won without firing a shot. The formal acquisition offer arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier to Innovate Tech's offices in a manila envelope that seemed almost anticlimactic after weeks of corporate drama. Tyler Brooks held the document with hands that trembled slightly, though whether from anger or defeat, even he couldn't say. Meridian Acquisition Holdings hereby presents a formal offer for the complete acquisition of Innovate Tech Systems. The letter began in the precise legal language that Bob Sullivan had perfected over 3 decades on Wall Street. The terms were generous, more generous than Tyler had expected, but the implications were unmistakable. Cora Mitchell was offering to buy his life's work. Sarah Martinez sat across from Tyler in the conference room they'd occupied for so many strategy sessions, watching him read through pages of financial projections and organizational charts. She'd spent the past 72 hours in a strange state of suspended animation, knowing this moment was inevitable but still unprepared for its arrival. "She's offering us positions," Tyler said finally, his voice hollow. "You as CTO under her leadership structure. Me as..." He paused, struggling with the words. Senior Director of Innovation Strategy. The title was carefully chosen. It acknowledged Tyler's role in building the company while making clear that he would no longer be in control. Sarah could see the deliberate psychology behind it, enough respect to soften the blow, but not enough to mask the reality of what was happening. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked quietly. Tyler was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the San Francisco Bay where morning fog was beginning to lift. When he spoke, his voice carried a resignation that Sarah had never heard before. "I built this company because I believed that innovation belonged to people like us," he said. "Young, hungry, willing to break things that needed breaking. I thought experience was just another word for being afraid to change." He set the acquisition documents on the table with careful precision. "But she didn't just outmaneuver us, Sarah. She did it using every principle I claimed was obsolete. Strategic patience. Long-term thinking. Understanding that real power doesn't announce itself, it just acts." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and sadness watching Tyler grapple with this recognition. She'd been preparing for this conversation since her meeting with Cora, knowing that Tyler would eventually have to confront the gap between his ideology and reality. "I'm going to accept her offer," Sarah said. "The CTO position." Tyler looked at her sharply. "You've already decided?" "I've been thinking about it since our first meeting with her," Sarah admitted. "Tyler, we built something good here, but we also made mistakes. Big ones. And the biggest mistake was thinking that wisdom had an expiration date." She pulled out her laptop and opened the technical documentation Cora had shared during their coffee meeting. "Look at this," she solved. "Our cloud systems integration problems in 2 days. 2 days, Tyler. We've been struggling with this for months." The elegance of Cora's solution was undeniable. She'd identified the core algorithmic conflicts and proposed modifications that would not only fix the immediate problems but improve system performance across the board. It was the work of someone who understood both the theoretical foundations and practical applications of the technology they'd been fumbling with. "She's offering to mentor us," Sarah continued. "To teach us how to build sustainable technology instead of just disruptive technology. I can't walk away from that opportunity." Tyler was quiet for several minutes, processing what felt like the collapse of everything he'd believed about innovation and leadership. Finally, he looked up with something that might have been relief. "I can't do it," he said simply. "I can't work for someone I dismissed as irrelevant. Every day would be a reminder of how wrong I was, how arrogant I was. I don't think I'm big enough for that kind of humility." Sarah nodded, understanding. "What will you do? Take the buyout? Start over somewhere else? Maybe learn something about listening before I build my next company?" Tyler managed a wry smile. "If anyone will fund me after this public relations disaster, 2 days later, Cora Mitchell sat in what had been Tyler's office, reviewing transition plans with Emma Johnson, who would be joining Innovate Tech as Chief Financial Officer. The space had been subtly transformed, Tyler's collection of disruptive innovation books replaced by technical manuals and strategic planning guides, his standing desk exchanged for a traditional setup that encouraged longer, more thoughtful work sessions. The cloud systems partnership is back on track, Emma reported. Dr. Torres says they're impressed with the speed of our technical corrections. They're even discussing expanding the relationship. Bob Sullivan joined them via video conference from New York, his satisfaction evident despite the professional distance of corporate communications. The financial restructuring is complete. We've consolidated the debt, secured new credit lines, and established a much more sustainable burn rate. Emma's projections show profitability within 18 months. Cora felt a satisfaction that went deeper than professional success. Innovate Tech was becoming the company it could have been from the beginning, technically sophisticated, financially sound, and led by people who valued both innovation and wisdom. Sarah appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. The new development team wants to present their modifications to the core algorithm. When you're ready, send them in, Cora said, then paused. Sarah, how are you feeling about all this? Sarah considered the question seriously. Humbled, educated, and more excited about our technical possibilities than I've been in months. Working with Tyler was energizing, but working with you is educational in a way I didn't know I needed. The development team filed in, a mix of Innovate Tech's original engineers and new hires that Cora had recruited from her network. The combination of youthful energy and experienced guidance was already producing results that exceeded what either group could have achieved alone. As they began their presentation, Cora reflected on the journey from that humiliating pitch meeting to this moment of quiet triumph. Tyler Brooks had taught her something valuable, that the dismissal of experience wasn't just personally painful, but strategically stupid. Companies that refused to learn from institutional knowledge were vulnerable in ways they couldn't even perceive. But more importantly, she'd learned that the goal wasn't revenge, it was evolution. Innovate Tech was now a better company than it had been under Tyler's leadership, not because youth was wrong, but because youth combined with experience created possibilities that neither could achieve alone. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack, saw the news about the acquisition completion. Proud of you, Mom. When do I get to visit the new offices? Cora smiled, remembering the months when she'd felt irrelevant and dismissed. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone who'd forgotten that true power came not from demanding respect, but from demonstrating competence so clearly that respect became inevitable. Dr. Patricia Williams had been right about the difference between justice and revenge. Justice meant ensuring that talent was recognized regardless of age. Justice meant proving that wisdom didn't expire at 65. Justice meant building something better than what had come before. And as Cora looked around the conference room at the team she'd assembled, Sarah's technical brilliance, Emma's financial acumen, the energy of young developers guided by experienced leadership, she realized that justice had been served in the most satisfying way possible. Innovate Tech was no longer just Tyler Brooks's disruption fantasy. It was becoming proof that the future belonged not to youth or experience alone, but to organizations wise enough to value both. 6 months after the acquisition, Innovate Tech's transformation was complete in ways that surprised even Cora Mitchell. She stood in the renovated conference room, watching Sarah Martinez present their latest product to a room full of potential clients, and felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the deep satisfaction of building something that would outlast her. Innovate Tech 3.0 represents a fundamental evolution in customer engagement platforms, Sarah explained to representatives from 3 Fortune 500 companies. By combining advanced algorithmic prediction with institutional knowledge about consumer behavior patterns, we've created a system that doesn't just adapt to user preferences, it anticipates them. The demonstration that followed showcased technology that neither the original Innovate Tech nor Cora's previous work could have achieved alone. Sarah's innovative approach to real-time data processing had been enhanced by Cora's understanding of long-term behavioral patterns, creating algorithms that were both cutting-edge and fundamentally stable. The technical architecture draws from decades of optimization research, Cora added during the Q&A session, while incorporating machine learning techniques that allow for continuous adaptation. We found that the most sustainable innovation comes from building on proven foundations rather than discarding them. The clients were visibly impressed, but more importantly, they were convinced. By the end of the week, Innovate Tech had secured contracts worth $15 million, representing more revenue than Tyler's version of the company had generated in its entire existence. Emma Johnson, now settled into her role as CFO, presented the quarterly results to Cora that Friday afternoon. We're not just profitable, she announced with barely contained excitement. We're sustainably profitable. Cash flow positive, debt service manageable, and growth trajectory that doesn't require constant infusions of venture capital. How does that compare to our projections? Cora asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. We're exceeding every metric we established. During the acquisition, Emma replied. ROI is running 23% ahead of projections. Client retention is at 97%. And our technical team satisfaction scores are the highest I've seen in any company assessment. The last metric was particularly meaningful to Cora. During Tyler's leadership, Innovate Tech had struggled with employee turnover and low morale. Engineers complained about impossible deadlines, constantly changing priorities, and a leadership structure that valued disruption over sustainability. Under the new model, those same engineers were producing better work while reporting significantly higher job satisfaction. Sarah knocked on Cora's office door, carrying a tablet and wearing the kind of satisfied expression that Cora had learned to associate with solved technical problems. The cloud systems integration is finally complete, Sarah announced. Not just functional, but elegant. Dr. Torres called it a masterclass in legacy system optimization. They want to expand our partnership to include 3 additional product lines. Cora smiled, remembering the months of frustration that had preceded this breakthrough. What made the difference? Understanding that innovation doesn't mean starting from scratch, Sarah replied. Your approach taught me that the most powerful solutions often come from improving existing systems rather than replacing them entirely. We kept the core strengths of both architectures and eliminated the conflicts. The conversation was interrupted by a knock from Michael Davis, who had become an unofficial chronicler of Innovate Tech's transformation. His follow-up articles about the company's evolution had attracted attention from business schools and management consultants interested in studying successful intergenerational leadership. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, Michael said. I'm working on a piece about corporate age diversity for Harvard Business Review, and I wanted to get your perspective on the changes here. Cora gestured for him to sit. What kind of perspective? The business case for age-inclusive leadership, Michael replied. Innovate Tech has become a case study in how different generational approaches can create competitive advantages. Your financial performance, client satisfaction, and employee retention metrics are all significantly better than industry averages. Sarah leaned forward with interest. What are other companies saying about our approach? That's the fascinating part, Michael said. 3 major tech companies have reached out asking about consulting on their own age diversity initiatives. Apparently, your success here has made Silicon Valley start questioning some of its fundamental assumptions about innovation and leadership. The recognition was gratifying, but Cora found herself more interested in the long-term implications. Are they serious about change, or just looking for public relations improvements? Both, probably, Michael admitted. But the economic incentives are becoming clear. Companies that can successfully combine experienced strategic thinking with youthful technical innovation are outperforming their peers. The market is starting to reward collaboration over disruption. That evening, Dr. Patricia Williams visited Innovate Tech's offices for the first time since the acquisition. She'd followed Cora's journey from that first humiliating pitch meeting through the complex emotions of corporate warfare to this moment of quiet triumph. It's not what I expected, Patricia said as they walked through the development area where young programmers worked alongside senior engineers, sharing knowledge and perspective in ways that had seemed impossible under Tyler's leadership. What did you expect? Cora asked. Something more vindictive, honestly. When you started this acquisition campaign, I was worried you were motivated more by hurt than by purpose. Patricia paused at a workstation where a 24-year-old developer was explaining algorithm optimization to a 58-year-old systems architect. This is something different. This is what collaboration actually looks like. Cora followed her friend's gaze, watching the easy exchange of expertise between generations. I think I learned something important during this process. Tyler's dismissal wasn't just personally painful, it was strategically stupid. But proving him wrong wasn't enough. I had to prove that there was a better way. And you have, Patricia observed. But what happens next? You've built something remarkable here, but you're still 67 years old in an industry that worships youth. How do you ensure this approach spreads beyond one company? The question had been occupying Cora's thoughts increasingly as Innovate Tech's success became undeniable. She'd proven that age and experience could create competitive advantages, but that proof meant nothing if it remained isolated to a single organization. I've been thinking about that, Cora said. Emma presented an interesting proposal last week about establishing an executive mentorship program. pairing experienced leaders with young entrepreneurs, not to control their companies but to provide strategic guidance. You'd be teaching other people to do what you did here. Teaching them to avoid what Tyler did, Cora corrected. The goal isn't to replace young leadership with old leadership. It's to create environments where both can contribute their strengths without dismissing each other's value. As they concluded their tour, Patricia asked the question that had been implicit throughout their conversation. Are you satisfied? You set out to prove that experience matters, and you've succeeded beyond what anyone could have predicted. But are you personally satisfied with how this turned out? Cora considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she'd been a dismissed consultant, struggling with feelings of irrelevance and professional obsolescence. Now she was CEO of a thriving company that had become a model for age-inclusive innovation. The transformation was remarkable, but satisfaction felt like a more complex emotion. I'm satisfied that we proved the principle, she said finally. But I'm more excited about what we're building. Innovate Tech isn't just succeeding despite having older leadership, it's succeeding because it combines different generational strengths. That's a model that could change how Silicon Valley thinks about talent and innovation. As Patricia prepared to leave, she paused at the entrance to study the company directory that now listed employees ranging in age from 22 to 64. You know what impresses me most about all this? What's that? Tyler Brooks started this conflict because he believed that innovation required dismissing the past. But what you've built here proves that the most powerful innovation comes from understanding the past well enough to build something better. That's not just good business, it's wisdom. Walking back to her office, Cora reflected on the journey from humiliation to transformation. Tyler's cruel dismissal had been intended to diminish her, but it had ultimately forced her to rediscover capabilities she'd forgotten she possessed. The acquisition campaign had been about proving a point, but building Innovate Tech 3.0 had been about something larger, demonstrating that age and experience weren't obstacles to innovation, but essential components of sustainable success. The foundation they'd built here wasn't just stronger than what Tyler had created, it was designed to last, to grow, and to prove that the future belonged not to youth or experience alone, but to organizations wise enough to value both. 1 year after the acquisition, Cora Mitchell stood behind the podium at the Tech Leadership Summit in San Francisco, looking out at an audience that included many of the same venture capitalists and startup founders who had once dismissed older professionals as irrelevant to innovation. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was delivering the keynote address at an event that, just 18 months earlier, probably wouldn't have invited her to attend. When I was forced into early retirement at 65, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the packed auditorium, I was told that my expertise was obsolete, that my strategic thinking belonged to a different era, and that modern innovation required a kind of digital nativity that my generation simply couldn't possess. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the audience. Many of them recognized the story. Michael Davis's articles about the Innovate Tech acquisition had become required reading in business schools, and Tyler Brooks's dismissal of Cora had become a cautionary tale about the costs of ageism in Silicon Valley. Today, I want to talk about what happened when one dismissed executive decided to prove that experience and innovation aren't opposing forces, they're complementary strengths that, when combined thoughtfully, create competitive advantages no single generation can achieve alone. The presentation that followed had been refined through months of speaking engagements, but it never lost its power to surprise audiences who expected either a revenge story or a simple redemption narrative. Instead, Cora presented data, Innovate Tech's financial performance, employee satisfaction metrics, client retention rates, and innovation indices that consistently outperformed industry standards. The key insight, she explained, isn't that older workers are better than younger workers, or that experience trumps innovation. The key insight is that sustainable competitive advantage comes from organizations that can synthesize different types of knowledge, historical context, strategic patience, technical creativity, and adaptive thinking, regardless of the age of the people who possess those capabilities. In the audience, Sarah Martinez watched with quiet pride as Cora outlined the technical breakthrough that had made their success possible. Sarah was now recognized as one of Silicon Valley's most innovative CTOs, but she'd learned to frame her achievements in terms of collaborative development rather than individual genius. Our platform succeeds because it combines algorithmic innovation with decades of behavioral research, Sarah had told MIT Technology Review in a recent interview. Working with Cora taught me that the most powerful solutions often come from understanding what's been tried before, why it succeeded or failed, and how to build something better rather than just something different. After the keynote, Cora moved to a smaller conference room for the announcement she'd been building toward for months. Emma Johnson stood beside her, along with Dr. Patricia Williams and a diverse group of executives, entrepreneurs, and academics who had been working quietly on a project that could reshape how Silicon Valley thought about talent and innovation. The Mitchell Foundation for Age Equality in the Workplace, Cora announced, represents a commitment to ensuring that what happened to me, and what happens to thousands of experienced professionals every year, becomes increasingly rare rather than increasingly common. The foundation's structure was as carefully designed as the acquisition strategy that had brought down Tyler Brooks. Rather than simply advocating against age discrimination, it would provide concrete resources, mentorship programs pairing experienced executives with young entrepreneurs, consulting services for companies interested in age-diverse leadership, and research initiatives documenting the business case for intergenerational collaboration. We're not trying to replace youth with experience, Emma explained to the gathered press. We're trying to create environments where both can contribute their strengths. The economic data is clear. Companies that successfully combine different generational perspectives outperform their peers on virtually every metric that matters. The foundation's first major initiative was already showing remarkable results. The Executive Bridge program had paired 20 experienced professionals with 20 promising startups, providing strategic guidance while allowing young founders to maintain operational control. Early metrics showed that participating companies were achieving profitability faster, scaling more sustainably, and maintaining higher employee satisfaction than control groups. Jack Mitchell watched his mother's announcement from the back of the room, his expression carrying a mixture of professional admiration and personal pride. As a corporate lawyer, he'd initially been concerned about Cora's acquisition campaign, worried that her desire for vindication might lead to poor strategic decisions. Instead, he'd watched her transform personal hurt into social change, building something that would outlast any individual victory. I used to worry about her obsession with this innovate tech situation, he told Patricia Williams earlier that morning. But I realize now that she wasn't obsessed with revenge, she was processing the implications of systematic age discrimination. This foundation isn't just about her personal experience. It's about changing how an entire industry thinks about talent. After the formal announcements, Cora found herself in conversation with an unexpected visitor, Tyler Brooks, who had requested a private meeting. He looked different, older somehow, though only 18 months had passed since their last encounter. His casual arrogance had been replaced by something more thoughtful, more careful. I wanted to apologize, he said without preamble. Not just for the consulting meeting, but for the entire approach I took to leadership. I've had a lot of time to think about what went wrong, and I realize now that my dismissal of you wasn't just personally cruel, it was strategically stupid. Cora studied his face, looking for signs of the calculating young CEO who had dismissed her so casually. Instead, she saw someone who had genuinely grappled with his mistakes and emerged with hard-won humility. "What are you doing now?" she asked. "Starting over," Tyler replied. "I've been working with a mentor, someone your foundation connected me with, actually. Learning how to build companies that value different perspectives instead of just disruptive energy. It's harder than I expected, but more sustainable." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, covering everything from technical architecture to leadership philosophy. Cora found herself genuinely impressed by Tyler's evolution. The arrogant young disruptor had been replaced by someone who understood that innovation required both creative destruction and institutional wisdom. "I have a proposal," Cora said as their meeting concluded. "The foundation is developing a case study program about failed leadership and successful recovery. Would you be interested in participating? Sharing your experience might help other young entrepreneurs avoid similar mistakes." Tyler considered the offer seriously. "You'd trust me with that kind of platform?" "Trust is earned," Cora replied. "But redemption is possible, especially when it's based on genuine learning rather than strategic positioning. Your story, the complete story, including the mistakes and the recovery, could be valuable for people trying to understand why age diversity matters in business." As Tyler left, Cora reflected on the unexpected turn their relationship had taken. She'd never intended to destroy him personally, but she also hadn't expected him to emerge from their conflict as a better leader. His willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and learn from them suggested that even the most entrenched ageist attitudes could be changed through experience and reflection. The day concluded with Cora's final obligation, a mentoring session with Maria Gonzalez, a 63-year-old former pharmaceutical executive who had been forced into early retirement and was now exploring opportunities in biotechnology startups. It was exactly the kind of situation the foundation had been created to address. "I feel like I'm starting over at an age when I should be winding down," Maria confided. "These young biotech founders look at my resume and see obsolete experience. instead of relevant expertise. Cora smiled, remembering her own feelings of irrelevance just 2 years earlier. Let me tell you about a consulting meeting I had 18 months ago, and what happened when someone dismissed my expertise as outdated. The story that followed had become both cautionary tale and inspiration, proof that age discrimination wasn't just morally wrong but strategically counterproductive. More importantly, it demonstrated that experienced professionals possessed something that no amount of youthful energy could replicate: the wisdom that comes from building, failing, learning, and building again. As the sun set over San Francisco Bay, Cora looked out from Innovate Tech's offices at the city that had once made her feel obsolete. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. She was no longer a dismissed consultant struggling with irrelevance. She was a CEO, a foundation leader, a mentor, and proof that the future belonged not to any single generation, but to organizations wise enough to value the full spectrum of human experience and capability. Tyler Brooks had been wrong about many things, but he'd been right about one: innovation did require breaking things that needed breaking. He'd just been mistaken about what needed to be broken. It wasn't experience or institutional knowledge that needed to be discarded, it was the assumption that wisdom expired with age. The acquisition was complete, but the legacy was just beginning. And as Cora prepared for another day of building something larger than any individual victory, she realized that the most satisfying form of justice wasn't proving others wrong, it was creating a world where such proof was no longer necessary. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.